Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, frequent flyers. Thank you for joining us today on the episode of The Lounge. Today's guest is Mark Towne, and we're talking about challenging your internal map on trust. Now, this is a topic that I love because trust is something that we don't always notice, but it's always there until it's not. And once it's not, we feel it. Mark Towne has been in the United States Army for over 34 years before he retired in December of 2020 at the rank of Brigadier General. He is currently the President and Chief Executive Officer of Vets Leadership, serves on the board of directors at .Life Inc., and is a former VP in the banking industry. Mark, I'm super excited to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Sarah, it's good to see you today, and thanks for having me on your show. Big fan of yours, and really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, so we met back in July at Heroic Public Speaking Core event and immediately connected and have since developed a conversation and friendship. So I'm really excited to have you here talking about something that's very important, because many times in the pursuit of excellence and in the pursuit of goals, we make decisions that we think are correct, that we have the best intentions for, but maybe we ruffle some feathers in the process, and trust is often broken and needs to be restored. And so this is as important in the business world as it is in the military. And as you could imagine, when you're moving large groups of people towards a common goal, trust is imperative, especially when the stakes are high. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you chose this topic and how you came up with the title?
How I came up with the title. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first, again, thanks for the intro. And as you mentioned, I spent, just under 3.5 decades in the United States Army. And the Army is, again, a very large organization, right around 1 million people. The Department of Defense, all military services, right around 2 million. And when you think about those organizations, leadership is at the core of what they do. And when you think about leadership, what's at the foundation of effective leadership? It really comes down to trust. So being in that institution, everything from a very small unit leader to running, one of the three components of the Army, and around every state and territory, 30 countries. At any given time, that's a really diverse organization, a lot of diverse in terms of people, diverse in terms of capability, but the ability to get there is founded on readiness and trust. And what the reason I pull trust out, think about it, and you mentioned earlier, it can be kind of an elusive term. People throw it out there, they don't think about it. Right. But at the end of the day, when you're putting somebody's life in your hands or yours and theirs, you can be trained, you can be ready, but at the end of the day, you have to really trust somebody with the mission that you're on. And just a little side note. So the Army has doctrinal publications. All right, here's describe not a training manual, but here's a description of who we are, why we do it. And if you look in there's a document on leadership in the profession. It's a 132-page document, but if you do a word search, trust shows up 196 times. It's not because it's poor editing. It's because it's that important to the mission. And why did I land on trust? Because when I thought about what is it that I did to be successful in this diverse organization? Was I really that good at a particular task or anything like that? And over time, it came down, well, I built trust among the people around me, above me, below me. And as I was leaving the Army, again, it's not just looking internally, but as you get to a certain point of the institution, you're looking at things outside the Army of how you're affected in multiple systems. And it's not just trust is at the base of leadership. I started studying it. Okay, and when you look at trust outside the military too, people have been talking about it forever, right? You go back, Confucius, 500 BC, he talks about trust. When I was probably junior to mid-grade officer, I read this book by Cotter on leading change, and he talked about trust being, a key component of teamwork and guiding coalitions. 10 years later, Covey comes out with his the Speed of Trust book.
Yes.
And again, I mean, if you do a quick search just in the last 7 years or so, you'll find over 15 books written on trust. So there's a common thread in almost all this literature. They'll come up with the 3 or 4 things that are super important of, this is what trust is. They'll also kind of define it differently. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about whether it's personal relationships or leadership of small teams, large organizations, I landed on not just trust, but trust readiness. And why is that? So how do you build the most powerful military in the planet in human history, right? It doesn't just happen because we decide we have it one day. It's because it's built over time. It starts with individual readiness that goes to a collective readiness, and to be able to do things that people are trained to do, but also what they're not trained to do. Because there's a level of trust that they're capable to pivot, right? To do things on that come up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But to me, trust is really the secret sauce of change. Trust is the secret sauce of relationship. Everything from an individual personal relationship to national security. And we can talk anywhere in there, but it's not just a thing that we walk by. But when you think of it and you listen to people when they're talking about serious problems, inevitably the word trust pops out there in some way, and it's almost like an afterthought. What I'm talking about is trust readiness needs to be our going in position, and as leaders, that it's not a tangential thing. It is a core element of if we really want to make a difference in things. So I'll pause there to see if you want to pull a string on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. You alluded to the fact that these different books that have been written on trust all have slightly varying definitions. How would you define trust?
So when part of when you look at the different definitions, and again, they're not necessarily wrong. It's how they frame their arguments. But oftentimes when you hear people talk about trust, they use trust to define trust. Okay.
Right.
So what is it, right? Is it, they'll some authors will talk about, use the word confidence. And I want to split those up here in a minute. They'll talk about a willingness to accept vulnerability. Is it a belief? Is it assured reliance? When I talk about trust, it's actually it's 2 things. It's faith and it's currency. And why I say those 2 things is, so I can have confidence that you're strong enough to swim, but I got to trust you to jump into your arms,
right?
Okay, that you're going to catch me. I want to tell a little story, if I could, about when I was selected for battalion command. To try to make this short, I'll hit the Reduced Digest version. But I was selected for battalion command to assume command in 2010. So for those who aren't familiar with structures, lieutenant colonel, Army has platoons, companies, battalions, brigades, divisions, corps, and it's really the first level of like larger unit leadership. And I had all these great ideas that I'm going to go in, and this is, I'm learning about the organization, the environment, and and we're going to do all some really cool things. And the day before the change of command, when I'm supposed to get the guidon passed to me, the colors of the organization given to me, I'm sitting under a tree, looking across a parade field and watching the organization go through their practice. My wife is in a different state at the time. She's going to join us for the change of command the next day. And I'm watching, I pull up my cell phone and I call her. And I said, my wife's name is Marianne. I said, Marianne, all those really great ideas I had? I said, yeah. I said, they just went out the window. I said, why? So we've got more core things that we got to take care of before we get to the really hard stuff. And so we the next day do the change of command. You go through the assessment of your organization. Doing all those MBA things. The management aspect of looking at processes, resources, people, mission, etc. And shortly thereafter, the commander, the brigade commander, we give him a pitch on, okay, here's my assessment. Here's what we need to do. Here are 3 courses of action. Here's the most dangerous, most expensive, etc. And where we need to go. And he makes a decision. Says, you got it. We're agreeing the plan. You're gonna resource you. So at the end of that decision briefing, he leaves. I mean, everybody leaves, and he and I stay back in the conference room. And we have a little one-on-one time. And he looks at me. He goes, Mark. He goes, yeah, you got the whole plan. We're going to resource you. We're going to get you where you think you can go. He says, but the most important thing you can do is build trust. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I've been in the Army for a long time. I understand. We get that. We understand trust. He goes, no, and he stops me right there. He goes, you need to understand. He says, I hope you never have to make this kind of a decision, but you need to build their trust to the level that if you ever tell them to go do something, they know they're not going to come back alive from, they're going to do it. And I'm like, whoa, that hit me right in the chest, because it was like this epiphany of, I talk about in some circles, the yin and yang of management and leadership. All the management tasks of process controls, decisions that we needed to make are super important. But what he did was he put the shot across my bow on the leadership standard that he expected.
Yeah.
And it was about purpose, direction, motivation, and then using all those tools. But you're never going to get from worst to first, which was the goal and the plan. And we did eventually, we got there. But his guides, and that struck with me, a lot of different things going on, and but that was the guidance, that was the standard, and it struck me that it wasn't, instead of me just having trust in my fellow soldiers and servicemen, now what he did was he said, Mark, you got to be able to define it, you're responsible for it, and I'm going to hold you accountable for it. And that's where when we think about leadership and trust. And if we look at trust as a secondary thing, nobody's responsible for it. Nobody's accountable for it, whether it's in ourselves and others. Now, I do want to say, that commander. So today, 9 years ago today, he died, and just the date was just ironic when I looked at what we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
And but that stuck with me to this day. What as I got into larger organizations, more complex organization leadership, that was still the standard. That the going in position was building trust to get to the effectiveness that you wanted to get to. And obviously you can't, there's a lot of friction in there, and not everybody, is around you. You get to are people trustworthy or not? But you're going in position as a leader is I'm going to build that trust with people and others. So that gets back to my definition, right?
Right.
The definition is, it's about faith. I can train you, and I'm gonna have high level of confidence with you. I don't think you can have confidence. Again, if trust is a higher level, and it's differentiated, because I can have confidence in you, but not trust. I trust you. I got to have confidence in you. And so when you go back to that manual, it talks about trust. It talks about trust and confidence. And so, when you're talking or, the responsibility of leadership, whether it's, again, personal relationship, small, medium, large organizations, the more complex, the higher level of trust you really need to have in order to be effective. So does that help?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people have that exact problem. They don't know how to define trust. So therefore, they don't really know when they have it, and they don't know how to cultivate or strengthen it. And so defining that, whether that's the definition you adopt or it's slightly variant from that, it's important that you do define it. And you also hit the nail on the head with another point of, not only do we need to be building trust with the people we are leading and the people that we work with or have relationships with, but we need the self-trust also. And so one of the best ways that I know to build self-trust is to do the things you say you're going to do. And if you can no longer do them or it's no longer aligned, you communicate that, right? Because when we say, oh, I'm going to go, it's something as small as I'll go to the gym tonight at 5 and you don't go and you keep repeating that, you are making that transgression against yourself and your own self-trust. So, making sure that you're not just throwing things out there, like you said, it's not just something to be spoken about and secondhand. It's something that you need to lead with and be very intentional about.
And if I could add on that too, your point about doing the things that you say that you do, but also being open and honest when you make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And it's, what as a young officer, we moved to. My wife and I just moved, and I had a career manager, right, that tells me where I'm going to go next, and you're gonna live here for several years, it's okay, go ahead, buy yourself a house. We bought our first house, and a couple months after we move in, I get a call from the guy saying, Mark, I got to hose you because I know I told you you're going to be there for a while, but not so fast. 24 months in a day, and we moved, and but I didn't like it. I didn't like but I sure as heck respected him, and I trusted that the why was important enough that, okay, you know what, my family and I are going to pack up and we're gone, and he said, I got this role, you have to be the guy in it, and it's a brand new organization and you need to lift it off the ground. It's okay, Roger, ready to go. And
Yeah.
In part of, back to the, because we talk about, I want to go back to readiness for a second.
Yeah.
Part of, in yourself, and we all get back to that. The reason I also talk about, the size of the military, right? 1 million roughly in the Army, roughly 2 million in the, whole Department of Defense. So people come from all different angles, right? All over the country, all different races, ethnicities, religions, or whatever. And they don't have the readiness in the tasks that they come to, but so we build them, right? And when you think about trust leadership, really the same thing applies. People come from different experiences, different. Some people are pretty trustworthy. Some people are willing to extend trust. Some people have had a lot of broken trust in their lives. Some people would say, I didn't ever have broken. I never had trust.
Right.
And so as a leader, trying to understand that.
Right.
And then this gets back. Okay, so now as leadership 101 in the Army, purpose, direction, and motivation, and improve the organization. Being again, whether personal relationships or across the whole gamut of structure of how we build our tribes. Understanding that diversity and embracing it, and then setting the conditions back to, okay, being responsible for the relationship and being accountable for it, doing things that actually will build that trust, and we can get into that, why Vets Leadership, frankly, was founded. When I look at my career in the Army, okay, Vets Leadership makes sense to, I think, pretty much anybody. It's not rocket science, okay, but it makes sense to, I think, anybody who's served in uniform. And I think probably in your industry too, anybody who understands, how aviation works, right? There's a big team out there, from the person turning the wrenches to the control tower to the flight crew, right? And a lot of people in between that I didn't mention. But it really starts with, and I say this because VETS doesn't stand for veterans. People say it doesn't. Yeah, I'm a veteran, but it stands for values, education, training, and sustaining. And so when you talk about building trust or leading any organization, and I want to, back to all that leadership literature and trust literature I was talking about, the irony of it is part of the irony is all that literature, most of it is endorsed by highly qualified, respected academics, CEOs, board chairs, coaches, psychologists, anybody who has actually built or had to run a team will tell you how important trust is.
Right.
Yet a lot of the surveys that are out there will also tell you that we have a trust problem. The Journal Academy Arts and Sciences published in 2022. We're actually a 50-year declining trend in trust in our own institutions. It's not just a today problem, yet we often form that in today. And so when I think about best leadership, people say, so why do you start with values whenever you have conversations with people? Well, because if you don't start with values, back that yin and yang between management, and leadership, you can actually get really good at doing really bad things.
Right.
Because it's, process, I got to control, I've got different routines to do it. I got decision support structures. With AI and things, I've got actually convergent, knowledge decisions that are being made without human interaction. But the culture is actually built around, the values of the individuals and the collective individuals that are there, and the values of the institution. And when I talk to people about values, because we throw that word around oftentimes, just like we do trust, right? And I said, no, these aren't aspirational. These are actually strategic and operational. Are they truly your values?
Yes.
And if you've never gone through values exercise, back to, do you want to be responsible and accountable for whether it's your own actions or trust building? Values is an exercise I think everybody should go through. The Army actually puts, we have institutional values, right?
Yes.
Leadership, but they put you, when you go through, it's called the pre-command course prior to assuming, these large organizations, put you through this pre-command course where they take you through this values exercise where, okay, what are your actual values? Well, are those aspirational or are they actual?
Right.
So if they're actual, what behaviors do you exhibit that actually, tell you that they're true? And so it's a leadership transparency thing. It's a leadership honesty thing to really start with values, because those are your vectors, if you will. When 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, how are you going to behave? How are you going to react?
Yeah.
In a high stress environment, we talk about being able to lead in a VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So, train to a task condition standard, get to a level of comfort. But because when things go wrong, it's not time to really, sometimes you just got to react, but that reaction needs to be based on a set of values. So when we go to education, the E piece, that's where it's about learning about each other. It's not just school work, and I don't mean that way. Because back to my initial point of readiness is a leadership imperative, not just an academic exercise or a management tool. Those things are super important, but you can't outsource leadership. You can't outsource trust building to somebody who's thinking about it, studying about it, but not accountable for the results. You can't outsource. When you got a pilot, flying a plane, he or she cannot outsource the responsibility of that aircraft to somebody else, regardless of what the team is doing, right? And so when it comes to education, it's learning about learning about people who are not like you.
Yes.
Get put in charge of an organization of a whole bunch of people who don't have your same religion. They could be atheists. They come from a different walk of life. Some had abusive backgrounds. Some of them are abusive. If you're going to be putting a team together, you have to be able to benchmark in your own mind the readiness levels of the people, not just the task, but the readiness in terms of trust. And so I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but just jump in if you disagree with me on any of this. But for me, the education piece is really important, because people can come at some things from a different value stream, and it doesn't mean they're wrong. And here's my challenge to people: if you haven't done this, you think about leadership, your own perspective. When I say leadership, you don't have to be in charge of an organization to be a leader. You can lead be a team member and you're still a leader. But how many of us have actually embraced conversations with people who have fundamental disagreements, the way we look at things?
Right.
Actively engage with them. And at the end of that conversation, it doesn't mean that we agree, but we have a better understanding, and I can still love that person.
Yes.
On the other end of it. And that's where I talk about with trust. If we can build beyond just confidence, but really build to a place of trust, that's where you can have really hard conversations that, instead of collision, conflagration, and impasse, we can actually be more innovative in developing ways ahead that are more optimal for us to continue a conversation. If you've ever read Simon Sinek's book on the infinite game,
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of what part. That's where the currency comes in, is because currency it is if you're able to build trust among people. Now we've got a trust level where, whether you and I are in the same place or not, we're actually part of each other's sensor array, right?
Yes.
And we're part of each other's support, not just a sensor array for risk, but support array to actually encourage and identify opportunities for moving forward with each other. And the training piece of this is about reps and sets. That trust is actually a skill, not just an afterthought. You go in there again, back to the Army, when we talk about training management, how do you perform a task under a certain set of conditions to a certain standard?
Yeah.
Right. And as you get better at something, then what do? You change the conditions. You're going to land a plane in the daylight and it's dry out, right?
Right.
You can move from there to nighttime in the middle of a storm, right? But you don't go right
into a storm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And who taught me that? That same leader who said, this is learning. He goes, remember, how you're going to do this. You can't tell you exactly how, but consider it's a progressive change of the conditions, because the task and standard are often the same. The task is, I want to build trust with you. The standard is, I want to build trust in a way that it becomes currency for both of us. And we build scenarios under which we can actually continue to build that trust and confidence in each other, where it actually becomes trust. And then there's a sustaining aspect to this. And why do I sustain it? Because oftentimes when we look at, what are the wedge issues of the time, where somebody wants to, they can't come to an agreement on something, or, they're going to be in conflict, or we get together, we talk about it, we feel great, but we really didn't do anything. We didn't do anything to change. Well, when I think about back to my experience, right? So get back to that example of, part of the secret sauce of our great military is sustaining combat power. Anybody can give a hit, anybody can take a hit, but can you sustain it to be able to get to your destination and control it? And that control is probably the wrong word, but when I say that is if you really want to have change, it's about sustaining trust in that currency place. So that and I'll use another example. We're running out of time here with you, but I had a safety program, back to the battalion that was in last and got it to first, and safety is important in aviation, right?
Absolutely.
And we had a terrible safety program. My folks, we don't have time for safety. I said, what do you mean we don't have time for safety? We don't have time to not have a safety program,
right?
And we don't not have time to do risk assessments, right? But here's the thing: is if it's always a bolt on, what does that do to your aerodynamics, right?
Right.
It's got to be rolled into part of your. Yeah, we still have the person who's in charge of the program and the checklist and all that, but what you have to do is roll it into, so that it becomes of the nature of who you are, so that when you're on a range, anybody feels safe, can call a ceasefire because they see a safety violation. Anybody can say, hey, you're putting a convoy together, and here's some dangerous areas that we need to pay attention to. Or, let me see your maintenance log to make sure that this thing's going to be able to get from point A to point B. You know, when it comes to trust, it's really the same thing. It may start out being a little clunky, but
Right.
if you do that, get into that reps and sets mode and really focus on, well, let's make it a priority of ours that trust is actually important, like we say it is, like the research says it is, like, you know, our institutions that actually, you know, build it into their DNA, demonstrate it, that trust becomes, you know, something that you pay attention to more than just when it's gone.
Right.
And you know, I saw a video the other day of Colin Powell, and he's if you don't know who he is, you look him up. Really, really awesome American. And somebody asked him, says, "What's you know, basically what's the most important aspect of leadership?" And he said the most important aspect of leadership is setting the conditions to build trust. You know,
Setting the environment up for success.
absolutely. And so, you know, again, you know, we all come to this with from different angles of trust readiness, but we can all be trust leaders, whether it's in our personal relationships, you know, building and organizing teams, the institutions, because if we just like building that big gorilla we call the United States Army, it actually starts with the individual readiness of the soldiers and civilians that make up the formation, and because you can't do those really big things without doing the little things first, and we can all be that ripple that can actually change the nature of a lot of the toxicity that we have in our nation today. Where let's actually sit down and again, you know, I've got stories where people who've changed my life, they don't even know that they did, because I sat down with them and went from a values to an let me learn more about you, creating scenarios where we can continue to do that, and sustaining a relationship that's not transactional but is transformational in the ability to, you know, again, you can have a value conversation, and you know, on the bottom line, you know, and I'll close with, you know, you know, the point about bottom line, back to I don't have time to have a training program. I don't have time to put values first, or excuse me, trust first in how I lead my organizations. In 2023, PricewaterhouseCoopers came out with a survey. 91% of business executives say that their ability to build and maintain trust improves the bottom line. In that same survey, less than half of those executives say they pay much attention to it, and only roughly a third of their employees say that they pay much attention to it.
Yep.
So think about that. Think about that. Management versus leadership approach. Okay, right. You got to take the responsibility and be accountable to yourself and those around you. And where part of another thing that, you know, I don't have time to get deep in this, but I want to throw this out there too. Why is this so important to me? Okay, because again, I believe in what America stands for. I believe that we can continue to form a more perfect union, and should, but I believe that we are becoming more toxic for a lot of different reasons, and trust is the secret sauce to get us to the next level where we can actually get back on the path. When you think about generational trust, okay, studies show that Gen Z is one of the most distrusting generations that we have. Yet the data also shows they're the most inquisitive, fact-checking, truth-seeking of the generations that we have. So think about the comparison to that, right? Well, why is that? Because it's old folks like me and that remember that 50-year trend?
Yep.
That we're looking at it as a bolt-on, or we're looking at it as something that is, you know, it's important. Is it important enough for you to wrestle with what it means? Is it important enough for you to wrestle with, do you want to be responsible for it? Do you want to be accountable for it? Because we pass that environment on to them. And I'm hopeful with Gen Z, with the truth seeking and fact checking, but I'm also concerned because, you know, when you think about, social media is not evil, but it is where it is. that
Right.
we need to help each other with understanding what our values are, learning about each other, and actually slowing down the decision cycle to act on a lot of things so that we can take time to better understand. And
Mm,
that's a whole nother conversation too. But yeah,
yeah.
that's my final thoughts are the takeaways. If you don't remember anything of what we talked about or what I said, uh, trust readiness is about faith and currency. Trust leadership is about being able to define it, being responsible, and being accountable to each other, and to set the conditions for whether it's in personal relationships to organizations to institutions, and that VETS leadership is kind of a source code for regardless of how you decide to engage, a leadership or trust building model. That if you don't start with values, you can get again, remember the warning. You can get good. Let's get good at good things as opposed
Yes.
to good at things that get us bad. And never stop learning about people who are different from you, and really challenge yourself to find somebody who you can appreciate and love after the conversation, even if you disagree with them. And then the training and readiness and sustaining. So, Sarah, I know I filibustered on you a lot here, but
No,
that's where I'm at with VETS leadership, and I'll just stop there and see what you got to say.
thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. You really wove all those points in with each other, and I can see, your passion and a lot of those stories and analogies that you brought to the surface. It's very relevant in everybody's day-to-day life, whether they're in the service, whether they're in a large or a small organization, or we're simply talking about our own personal relationship with the self. I really appreciated your definition with belief and currency, because we, as you said, with
Currency, yep.
I can swim, right? And maybe I believe you tell me that I can swim, and I think I'm pretty sure I can do it, but I also need that trust in order to jump, because I know that you will also help catch me just in case I can't do it, right? So it's a little bit of that safety, and that goes into another big word that's being used a lot right now, psychological safety, right? People will not make decisions or be willing to be accountable if there's no psychological safety for them to be able to call that ceasefire. And we don't have to be talking about a firing range. We could be talking about any sort of action, right? And the slowing it down gives you the awareness so that you can make better, more informed decisions and be moving forward together rather than as disjointed teams. So I really appreciate everything you brought up. The VUCA term I had not heard before. So that was the volatility,
Volatile, uncertain, complex.
uncertainty, complex and ambiguous, right? And so that is certainly a lot of business aviation environments. It's certainly aerospace environments. We're exploring the new frontier. We are going into new operations every single day. It's not a scheduled route. So how do we make sure that we stay aligned with those values as we're navigating that uncertainty, as we're navigating this environment, so that we can be safe, so that we can, make good decisions, and as you said, get good at the good things, right? So thank you so much. That was amazing. And I have to ask, you threw out a couple books and some resources, which was awesome. I shared that in the comments, put them up on the screen. But who would you say is on your personal board of directors? I know you mentioned the gentleman whose anniversary of passing is today. That's remarkable. And timing is everything, right? We didn't even know that when we planned this date.
No, we didn't.
So it's very synchronous indeed, and serendipitous. But who would you say is on your personal board of directors?
So number one is I'm a person of faith, a Christian, so I'd say Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, is number one. My hero, and my other hero is my wife. We've married, 31 years, and she is my hero, and my best friend and my best critic. I would say my kids are too. They are really good at not pulling punches and throwing a few even when they probably shouldn't. I love them. And then I've got some senior people that I served with in the military that I have a high level of trust with, that we can have great conversations about how we want to, change the world a little bit. I've got some friends that I've developed since I retired, that both in private industry and also a kind of a transition group that I'm with, and then the people on my board that I'm a nonprofit with. Again, all of them, bring something different, and in that group there are people that I have fundamental disagreements with on some things, but I love them dearly, and we can have great conversations sometimes. To me, I like walking toward that kind of friction, not away from it, because there are just so many things when you turn around and say, wow, I'm actually a better person because I knew you.
You're more aware. Yeah, you have a better understanding.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my board.
Thank you. And I love that you highlighted yet again the differences, because too often it's easy, it's comfortable, like you agree with me, I'm getting external validation, this feels nice. But can you sustain your own integrity to the values without pointing fingers and poking the bear in the chest and creating a confrontational impasse, as you said before? And that's, you referenced a podcast you had seen me on, Grappling with the Gray. And that was my first experience. There was actually 2 episodes with the same 2 other individuals. There were 3 of us with the host. And it was my first experience, I'd have to say, maybe ever, where there was passion and heat in the conversation due to opposing viewpoints and the utmost respect and reverence for the other as a human being. And so we were able to have this amazing conversation without it degrading into name calling and all the typical things we see when people don't feel safe to express, and then they feel like they have to defend, right? And they're challenged. So making friends with people who see things differently helps expand your worldview, and you get a better understanding of how the world works to others, which also helps you lead them and build trust. So that's very powerful. So what would you say your superpower is?
So my superpower is my values. Okay, back to and I say that because, again, when I went through that drill down exercise at a pre-command course to mark what are your personal values: faith, family, integrity, leadership, and people matter. And so, again, back to who's on my board, and that faith, love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments lay all the law and the prophets. If love, right? Love me doesn't mean that we have to agree with each other, but it means that I should treat you with dignity and respect and care about your worldview on things, and we can do things together. Family, being the best husband and dad that I can be. To me, I used to tell people when I was in uniform, the coolest leadership opportunity is to be a dad and be a husband, and and you never turn off. Right. Because if you do, then again, leadership doesn't check itself at the door.
Right.
And then integrity, being honest with people, even when they don't want to hear it. I used to tell people when I get, interviewed for roles, that when I was in the Army, I say, if you want somebody who's going to tell you what you want to hear, then I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that, and then they and then they hire you, and they say, well, wait a second, I didn't think you were serious.
Right.
No, really, I was, and because you get to certain levels in organizations, and so much is filtered, and so much is, and people want to get close to the shield, and that's true both in in the military and in other outside as well. I think there's a lot of human nature there, but what we need people who are going to tell us that, what, that's not quite right, and you can't do that, or if you do, here are the implications. And so integrity is and then leadership, right? Purpose, direction, and motivation. God's blessed us with the opportunity to be a leader, right? Well, then do it. and make life more than just about yourself. And when you help other people share their burdens, it's really, you know, it can be very energizing to be able to do that. Stop thinking about your own problems. And I mean, yeah, we all have to wrestle with our own, but helping others resolve theirs is and do big things is a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, the fifth one ties to all the previous four, which is people matter. You know, one of the things that somebody says about me, it said again, and I tell people, you know, the coolest things that you'll ever do never show up in a performance evaluation or your compensation package. The coolest things that you'll ever do show up in the lives of other people, and you don't need credit for it. Your fingerprints don't need to be on it, but you can see it. If God's blessed you with that, then I mean, you know, again, that's the superpower to be, you know, the value vectors, if you will, that help you, you know, lead through a VUCA environment and in, you know, in a place of love and joy. And so that's to me, that's why, again, to me, that's my superpower.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, and the language you use and just how it all intersects is a really beautiful representation of what embodied leadership looks like, because sometimes people go through a values exercise, but they don't actually practice. And I like to invite people and offer the practice of using your value like a verb. And if you take that value and you make it a verb, what does it look like? And then that will help you inform you on whether or not you're living in alignment. And, you know, if you need to pivot a little bit and realign, that's okay, right? It happens to the best of us, but it's about coming back to that each time you catch yourself and building your awareness with that practice. So that's a wonderful superpower. And I think I know how you'll probably answer this question. I mean, you've spoken to it quite a bit throughout this interview. But how would you say you best serve or represent humanity?
So part of you know, being a soldier and a leader, and you know, you become planners, right? You know, and you're strategic planners. And one of the things you always talk about people in their strategic plan is what's their mission, what's their purpose, right? And as a transition from the military, I built my mission statement is to build trust among diverse leaders and communities of interest to solve the strategic problems of our time. And so that's the place where I'm spending my time and energy. And I think I can best help humanity is in that lane. And I'll tell you, you know, part of the journey, and I tell this story about that. That's not when you think about what's your purpose, what's your mission, where you fit in the world. Just like your values, just like thinking about trust, it that's not something you should really. You may come to you, right? But can you test it? And I was talking, and that mission statement actually started out with restore trust. And I was having a conversation with a person that he says, Mark, you know, restore actually implies that it was there in the first place. There's a lot of people that would look at their lives and say that the trust was never there. And so the wisdom of someone who is very different than me, a lot of different worldviews, you know, I embraced. And it's like, yeah, he's actually right. It's about building trust. Because if we look at trust builders, again, across diverse, where are the levers, the leaders and communities of interest, in order to do what? To solve strategic problems. And because we've got big ones that require a lot of little levers here to actually make big change. And so, yeah, thought about it, prayed about it, and landed on that. And that's where I'm spending my time and energy. And I think you're a trust builder too, Sarah. And I really think you not just are going to, but you have a lot of goodness in you and what you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mark. It was a pleasure to have you on the show today. Where can people find you if they would like to connect or learn more about VETS leadership?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Towne, easy to find. The other thing is you can send me an email at mtowne, MTOWNE, at vetsleadership.com.
Amazing. Thank you again, Mark. I'm going to put that up there. It's going to be in the comments as well. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, you'll be able to easily connect with Mark. Thank you again. It was a pleasure to have you. And a reminder for all of the people watching today's episode of The Lounge, if you are out on a mission to change the world, that journey begins with changing yourself. Thank you so much.